Today on Homeworthy, we're taking you into the pre-war Brooklyn townhouse of interior designer Christina Salway. Appreciating the value and beauty in her Victorian home's original features, she chose to honor those architectural details by restoring the sliding doors and staircases throughout, highlighting the crown moldings and infusing the space with antiques she's collected over the years. Enjoy! You're watching Homeworthy, where we believe every home has a story. By clicking the join button below, you not only support the production of these videos, you also gain access to exclusive content just for members. And today, our members will get a look inside Christina's charming and spacious in-home office, which converts into a versatile guest room.
Hi, Homeworthy. I'm Christina Salway, and you're joining me in my townhouse in Brooklyn, New York. Come on in. So you come in and the first thing you see is our front entryway. And I was really driven by function as much as aesthetics in this space. So I always think you need a place to put your stuff down when you walk in. And I have an 11-year-old son, and so I need a place to put shoes immediately, because otherwise, if I don't have a place to put shoes, there will be shoes and bags and stuff everywhere. And this piece I literally found for free on Instagram. Like, someone I followed was making like a template for a table, and she's like, I got this, do you want it? It's free. And I zoomed over to Bushwick to pick it up, and it's the perfect piece. Basically, all of our shoes go in these little cubbies. It's a perfect place to put your stuff down, a perfect place to put your keys. But also, like when I have somebody coming to film, it really dresses up pretty well. And then on this side, major hook storage. Just again, it's all about function in this space, but you still want it to look clean and tidy, and we're getting kind of the best of both worlds. The mirror actually came out of an apartment that I was working on for a client on the Upper West Side. It was this really exquisite apartment that had a huge amount of sort of pre-war details, and my client was sort of trying to shift it towards something a little bit more modern, and she really didn't like this mirror, and I was like, really? Because I really do like this mirror. And so I brought it home and I hung it in my front hallway, and here it now resides. And then the light fixture I actually found on Facebook Marketplace for 40 bucks. And I wanted something that had real presence. You know, this is a really high ceiling, and we have all the pressed tin ceilings throughout the apartment or throughout the house. And I really wanted to sort of draw your eye up so that you really got to see that. And I think that this really achieves that. In our actual little vestibule, so when we bought the house, this is in Greenpoint, and when we bought the house, it had the old school like asphalt shingling on the front, which is really common in Greenpoint. It's like one guy went through Greenpoint in 1960 and sold everybody asphalt shingles. And we actually took the shingles off and restored the original clapboard, and then we reinstalled the original doors. But these aren't our original doors. They're actually architectural salvage, and we found them at a place upstate. There's an incredible salvage place called Hudson Valley Architectural Salvage. So we got these from there, and we brought them back and fitted them. We reinstalled a transom. We opened this transom up. It had been closed up, but we knew that there was a transom back there. So we installed this, installed these, and then this wallpaper is actually vintage wallpaper I found in a house that I was renovating in Maine. It, like, literally, they, for whatever reason, the previous owners had like boxes and boxes of old wallpaper, and I pulled it out and I was like, well, this is fantastic. So I figured eventually I'd have a way to use it, and lo and behold, here it is. The floor tile we installed ourselves. This painting I actually lugged back with me from France, which I don't know if you've ever traveled with a painting, but it's like very harrowing. And I had it in a shopping bag, and I just had to carry it on the plane, be like, excuse me, please don't hurt my painting. And then I get it framed when I got back. So that's the sort of, I mean, this was a major transformation, both on the exterior and the interior of this vestibule, because it was really pretty dismal when we got here. When we got here, the entire house was covered in rolls of linoleum. They had put linoleum, layers and layers of linoleum over all of the floors and all the way up the stairs. And everything, all of the moldings, all of the railings, everything was painted like dark, like sticky brown. It was an uncanny texture. So we restored all of the floors, obviously pulled up all the linoleum, refinished the floors, refinished the stairs, and then I stripped this banister myself, which was an absolutely miserable process. I cannot discourage anyone enough from doing it. It's so time consuming. But I will say I'm incredibly happy with the results. So if that's any indication, maybe it was worth it. But it was an unbelievably time consuming process of just layers and layers and layers of paint stripper to get it off, and then sanding. But this is the original newel post. These are the original spindles. And now, I mean, now that it's down to natural, it's really quite beautiful. It's like an incredibly soft, like almost velvety wood. So we're pretty happy with it. These two paintings actually came out of a country house that we owned. This was actually given to me by my mom's best friend. It has a bullet hole in it, which he thought was really a hoot. And this guy is just this incredibly somber portrait. I have a couple of these. I call them my ancestors. They are not my ancestors, but I have these sort of like very somber paintings of evidently very affluent men and women who do not belong to me. And then moving on, this leads right into the living room. And it's funny, like a lot of people, I think when they renovate these townhomes tend to open this up and make it all into one big open plan. And a couple of friends, when they came over, they're like, is that the plan? Are you gonna make this into one big floor? And I just was like, absolutely not. Like, this is a Victorian home. It was built in the 1850s. I really wanted to honor what it was. And also it's got all of this like extraordinary architectural detail. It's got this sensational multi-phase molding. It's got all of this multi-phase crown molding. I mean, this is the stuff you pine for when you think about a pre-war building in New York City. And the idea of getting rid of that in the name of a sort of like open floor plan, which is totally unappealing to me. And ultimately, I think the way that we live here, it really works. Like, I really like that there is a sense of an entryway. I like that the living room is its own space. I like that the dining room is its own space. I think for our like sort of lifestyle, it works really well. This living room is highly, highly functional in that there's an enormous amount of seating. It's incredibly comfortable. There is a television hidden behind that painting, which everybody jokes about because they can't believe I hid a television behind a painting. It's kind of a jack of all trades in that it's like incredibly comfortable, and you can sit here. I mean, we sit here as a family and we watch movies all the time, but we also, 2 nights ago, we had a whole bunch of people over and we all sat in here and like drank cocktails, and it really, it's really able to do double duty that way, which I really love. And I think about that when I'm designing for clients as well as for myself, is I really want something to be, I want it to have versatility. I want it to be both incredibly comfortable, but still perform aesthetically when you have your like fanciest friends over. And I think like trying to find the balance there. Basically, I mean, you're gonna find this when I do this house tour. Almost everything in this house has a story, so you just have to like pick your poison. All of the fireplaces in the house are original. They were covered in like layers and layers of paint. Again, we stripped all of these ourselves. A miserable process, excellent results. Over here we have this wild collection of like weird and wonderful carved wooden things. I think I'm really attracted to both the kind of the architecture and the texture of these. It's like they're adding dimension without adding noise, which I'm really interested in. I like to play around with that a lot. The tiger rug is something I acquired when I was in France. I was at a flea market in France and this guy was selling this tiger rug. I was actually at a food market and I was walking along. I was like meant to be buying strawberries and I was like, what is that tiger rug? And I brought it home and my original intention was to lay it on the floor of the vestibule, but everybody kept tripping over his tail and I was like, this is not sustainable. So either someone's gonna get hurt or the tail's gonna get hurt. And so I decided just to use it as a wall hanging, and I really love it up there, to be honest. I have a whole collection of these antique stairs, these miniature stairs. I'm interested in these sort of like odd architectural elements. I think they're curious, and I think there's something really fun about creating a sort of collection that feels very curated and thoughtful, but also a little atypical. I obviously also don't mind a little whimsy. I think my son stuck this eye patch on there, and I was like, that seems good. So that's that. These guys were Facebook Marketplace finds. I think they were maybe $200 for the pair, and then I had them reupholstered. And again, they're just like weird, and they're like almost like a little. There's something like a little comical about them, but I thought they were really beautiful and interesting. I'm very attracted to like a little odd, I think. And so I think that kind of a lot of this articulates that. Over here, this is what John and I call our divorce couch. I bought this, I think I actually bought this on Craigslist when Craigslist was still really a thing. And we picked it up from a loft in Dumbo and put it on top of our Volvo, which is not what you're meant to do when you're moving a large couch. And we brought it back to our old apartment. And I had measured really fastidiously to make sure it would fit in the elevator and that it would fit through the door. And I had not accounted for this one turn it had to make to get into our door, and we couldn't get it in. So then we took it down the elevator and tried to take it through the hallway of the lower apartment and up the stairs, and we got it stuck in the downstairs hallway, like stuck. Couldn't get it, we couldn't move it left, right, up, down, got stuck in someone else's hallway, which is not a cool thing to do in New York City, and had to call the sofa doctor, and he had to take it apart completely and bring it up into our apartment and put it back together. And then when we moved out of that apartment, I had to take it apart again and have it put back together on the street. And John was like, I'm pretty sure that whatever you saved by buying this on Craigslist, you have now spent on sofa doctors. But it was the absolute closest we've ever gotten to divorce is when we got that couch stuck in that hallway. He was like, that's it, I'm done with you. Anyway, here we are now, so I guess we persevered. And then ultimately, I now have had this couch for, I think about 12 years. And at some point, the leather seats started to break down. And so I had them recovered with this mohair, and I did this little green piping. And again, it's like these little fun details, right? Like, I think I'm a big believer in buying used furniture that is of good quality and then reupholstering it and giving it another life. And one of the great things about doing that is at the same time, it gives you the opportunity to make something feel really custom rather than kind of big box, which is like such a great hack, really. This whole setup is actually inherited from John's grandmother. And it's like, again, I think I like the idea of this home feeling sort of like a Victorian cabinet of curiosities. I think I sort of always have this sort of fantasy that our house is gonna feel like, like some Victorian explorer has like gone around the world collecting things, and this is his accumulated stash. And that's like kind of what I'm channeling whenever I'm decorating. And so when she died, she left this, and I was like, I absolutely want that. So that's like another little piece. Okay, I'm gonna show you. You're not allowed to make fun of me for this though, but this is where our TV is. And it's on a little cleat, and it just hangs there. And then when we're done, we just put it back on the cleat, and it's gone. And like everybody I know is like, I can't believe you take that painting down every time you watch TV, but we don't really watch that much TV, and I just really couldn't stand the idea of having a television just like staring me in the face all the time. So that's what we opted for. This guy, obviously you want to know about this guy, come on. This is like the most sensational chair ever. I bought it at an auction at Doyle's, which is on the Upper East Side. And it's funny, like, I've bid on things in auction before, but this piece, I like saw it in their catalog and I was like, oh my God, I need that. And I went, and it was, I don't know if you've ever done an auction. it's so stressful and you're sitting there with your little paddle and you feel like you're gonna have a heart attack. And I just was like bidding and bidding and bidding, and then I won it, and I think it's possibly my favorite piece of furniture. I just think it's outrageous. It's upholstered in Pierre Frey, which is a really great textile maker. And I just think it's preposterous. Look at this thing. One of my friends says it has good acoustics, which I think is like always the sign of a good piece of furniture. The only things that we bought new in this house are basically these two chandeliers, the bed linens, and the dishes and glasses, I think. And towels, I guess. But almost everything else is like vintage, antique. It's from Facebook Marketplace. It's from yard sales. I really love to collect, but the light fixtures, these two light fixtures, both in the living room and the dining room, are both brand new. And I wanted to, I didn't want to get trapped in the pre-war aesthetic so much that it felt like I was creating a museum. I really wanted to create a juxtaposition of new and old. And I think this really sort of achieved that. I think it's fun, it's interesting, it's architectural, but it also doesn't feel overly precious or overly serious. And I think that's sort of something I continually in the house try to achieve, is that balance between, sort of beautiful design and, really intentional design, but also not overly serious. I want it to be accessible, I want it to be fun, I want it to feel like you're allowed to live here. So one of my favorite details about the dining room are the pocket doors. These are original. They were here, and they were totally painted over. The glass was completely painted over. So we had them dipped. You could actually, we took them out totally, and we sent them to a place in New Jersey where they dip them and strip all of the paint off of them, and then we reinstalled them. And again, these are these architectural details that are original to the house. They're really classic pre-war design details. And this is the stuff that when you buy a townhouse, these are the gems you're looking for. And it's interesting too, even just functionally, as I said, as a family, the way we move through this house, sometimes we'll have a dining room full of adults in here and a living room full of kids in here, and the kids can all sit in here and watch TV, and we can close these doors and the adults can all sit in here and eat, and we can live in perfect harmony. And that kind of layout works incredibly well for our family. Obviously, again, to each their own, but the way that we live, having these separate spaces is really functional for us. The dining room is sort of this interior room, and it doesn't get a tremendous amount of light. It only has this one window. And I decided, rather than try and sort of pedal against that and make it white, and sort of, often when white doesn't get enough light, it really reads gray. And I really did not want this to be a gray room. And so I decided just to lean in and do a color with some real saturation. And this is Farrow & Ball's blue-green. And I think it's a really successful color. It feels really rich, it feels really saturated, but it's not sort of overwhelmingly dark. I think it just feels kind of moody and rich. Of course, everything in here also has a story. I'm sorry. The dining room table and chairs were bought on Facebook Marketplace. I had never seen a chair with this design. They've got pegs for the seats. They're really curious. It's an antique set. And it actually came with a huge hutch, which we now use in our pantry. So I'll show that to you later. As you come into the room, we've got this incredible chandelier. This is one of my favorite pieces. This came from Soho Home. And I just think, again, much like the light fixture in the living room, it's a real showstopper, but it's also not overly serious. It's not overly formal. I think it brings a little of the kind of modern funk to the room. I didn't want this to accidentally become just a Victorian farmhouse. I really wanted to kind of pull that tension a little more. So I think that really achieves that light fixture does. The huge mirror, this is a Victorian gilt mirror, and this actually came out of my husband's bar. He used to own a bar in East Williamsburg. And when we sold it, they bought the entire everything, lock, stock, and barrel, except the mirror. I said, the mirror does not stay. And so we brought the mirror here. And as soon as it landed here, it was like, oh, it should always have been here. These are my other ancestors. Also not my ancestors. These actually came from a client of mine, like one of my very favorite clients, and she had them hanging in her home for like a decade. And we were working on her home and we were doing these renovations, and she looked at me and she's like, you know, I am so sick of those people looking at me. And I was like, well, I am not. I will totally have them look at me. And so I brought them here, and here they sit. So this is a seltzer faucet. It has cold water that's filtered and then carbonated water. And I've never been so hydrated in my life. It's like an absolute delight. And it runs through a filtration system, so it's cold. It's like the greatest gift. It's insane. Also, it's like a great way to wow people when they come over for dinner. We were like, would you like flat or sparkling? And they're like, what is this, a restaurant? Over here, this whole array, this whole vignette, all of these are antique or vintage Hager pottery, well, largely Hager pottery. And they actually, most of them, like all of the little pieces, came from our wedding. So when we had our wedding, instead of having like a formal florist do our flowers, I collected all of these different like sort of matte white pottery vessels, and my mom's really good friend did all of the floral arrangements for us, and they were on all of the tables. And at the end of the wedding, I then collected them all back together. I actually gave a bunch to people because I had so much white pottery at that point, and I kept some of my favorite pieces and then kind of made a vignette of them all together, which is sort of, I mean, it's sweet. It's like a really lovely, like everyday reminder of our wedding, which is pretty lovely. The rug is from Cherish. It's one of their reed rugs. And the thing that's really incredible about these rugs is they come in set sizes, but you can also order additional squares and you can stitch them on. So you can totally customize the size, which is sheer genius. Like, I've not seen anybody else do that with a rug. And as a designer, like, the number of times you deal with these rooms that just want a rug that isn't 8 by 10 or 9 by 12, but like 8 by 8 or 6 by 7, you know, it's not every room's a rectangle. And the idea that you can like stitch on these extra squares is just like, why haven't we been doing this? It's such a good idea. We host a lot. John is a really avid cook. To be honest, I'm really more of a baker, but John is a really avid cook. So we probably host dinner parties like 2 or 3 times a month. So this space like does like major sort of heavy lifting in that respect. But also as a family, we just sit here, you know, we sit here for dinner. We really sit in there for breakfast, but we sit in here for dinner almost every evening. I mean, the flowers are just, I have like these little guys, the little yellow puffs. I have like such a soft spot for them. And these, I believe, are like some kind of yellow orchid. And again, like I love to have, I mean, you can see throughout the house, I have like plants, I have flowers all the time. I just think, again, it adds like sort of a layer of like sort of humanity to a home, right? It really feels like we live here, and it gives a sense of like warmth and vibrancy. And sometimes I think instead of having stuff, having plants goes a long way. So the kitchen was one of our biggest renovations. This room was actually a bedroom when we got here. I think historically it had been a kitchen, but the people who were living here before us were using it as a bedroom. So there was none of this in here anymore. And so we basically totally overhauled the kitchen. We installed the backsplash, we installed the cabinets, we installed the stove, we installed the sink. The sink actually came from a kitchen that was upstairs that now is a bedroom. And this we actually had from our house in Maine, and we brought it down with us. And the cabinets, I actually had a cabinet maker that I work with in New York. They're called Express Millworking. And I gave them one of the doors from the pantry cabinet, and I asked them to match that because I really wanted these to feel as much like they were sort of part of sort of original to the house. I really wanted the whole kitchen to feel like it was always here, and was sort of trying to channel that sort of sense of a kind of Victorian kitchen scullery sensibility, which is also why I ran the tile all the way up. The tin ceilings are original. The mantelpiece is original. And then we kind of added everything else. The tile, you know, John jokes that I've been like in my like green phase for about 5 years. I found this tile at Complete Tile and it just blew my socks off. And I think I just wanted to kind of go big or go home. And so we ran it all the way up the walls. We put this in ourselves. And then for us, my feeling was, this is a really limited amount of space. There wasn't a huge amount of sort of optionality there. It's like kind of this is it, because we have windows on this side and the pantry behind. And so the conclusion was dishwasher, stove. We have this one cabinet that goes into the corner. So it gives us a fair amount of storage. But the real reason this all works is because of the pot rack. So much of our cooking stuff is hanging here. And I think that like kind of liberates the need for that much more below counter storage. And then interestingly, like this is really it, which is fascinating. You know, I think people often, when they're designing kitchens and they're thinking about kitchens, it's like so much cabinetry, so much storage, but you know, this is it. I mean, we can host a dinner party for 8 and have like 4 courses based on what's sitting here. And, you know, we don't really need much more than that. So that's kind of the gist of the kitchen. It's sort of high efficiency, but also, you know, with an eye to being as sort of beautiful as possible without compromising function. As I said, John is a really enthusiastic cook. And so kind of no decision could be made that was only about being beautiful. It had to work as well. And that's really the way this is laid out. Like even just having these 2 spaces flanking the stove, having this as an additional workspace, like we really made use of every single inch of this kitchen. So the sink is like a great example of sort of being both aesthetically pleasing and highly functional. And that obviously it's bringing a lot to the kitchen in terms of what it looks like, but also it's this incredibly deep basin. It's got this integrated drain board. So it really is, it's like kind of doing everything, right? It's bringing it aesthetically, but also really, really like very efficient. So the island is actually a freestanding piece of furniture. It's just, I think it's probably like a dining room console, but we couldn't have like a conventional island in here. There's not enough width in the room. You wouldn't be able to pass by stools. And so what I decided to do was get a much sort of narrower piece of furniture and top it with the same stone, with the same profile as the rest of the counters, and then flank it with stools. And that way it's sort of doing the same function as a kitchen island, but taking up literally half the footprint of a conventional island. And I mean, the amount of time that we end up, it's very funny, but the amount of time we end up sitting in here, like 6 adults while John is cooking and I'm like leaning against the sink or I'm like sous chefing, and everybody just ends up in this room rather than the rest of the house is unbelievably frequent. And it's one of these things that's, you know, we could have just had like a little round table, like a little breakfast table, but there's something about this that again, really is both about function and aesthetic in that John can use it as a work surface when he's cooking every day. We can use it as a social space when we have friends over. We can sit here and have breakfast. It's, you know, it's really doing all the things. And I think that's such a great sort of takeaway when you're thinking about design is how can I make every single choice as like versatile, as functional, as beautiful as possible? Like, can I hit all of those notes? I mean, it's funny, like often I feel like my aesthetic for myself is very different than what I do for my clients. I'm not a really dogmatic designer, and I tend to design for the client rather than sort of bringing my signature to them. Whereas in my own home, I think I'm really conscious about how I balance sort of quiet and noise. And that's how I describe it, quiet and noise. Like I like the idea of the sort of box being a little bit more serene, and then there being these like kind of punches of color or punches of sound. And I think it sort of creates a good balance so that it doesn't feel overwhelming. I don't want to come into a house and just feel like everything is coming at me. I like the idea of there being sort of moments of peacefulness and then elements that are interesting. And so in the dining room, I kind of inverted that, where the walls are a little more bold and the furniture is a little bit more mellow. In the living room, the walls are very quiet and the furniture is a little bit more bold, and kind of like tipping those scales back and forth so that you feel like you can move sort of serenely through a space and don't feel overwhelmed or underwhelmed. This was another, like maybe it was also a kitchen or something. There was a little sink back here, and we moved this enormous piece of furniture into this room, which is kind of counterintuitive, right? Because it's a tiny room and it's a huge piece of furniture, but it has so much storage. So we have all of our like sort of small appliances, our like food processor, our blender, all of that stuff all goes in here. The microwave is here, the toaster is here, all the ugly stuff that happens in a kitchen, it's all back here, which is great because it doesn't mean we've compromised function, but we also have been able to sort of retain the aesthetic of the kitchen. And then as you go deeper, we've got wine racks, we've got all of our food storage. So it's still like all of the function is still here, but we've really managed to strike the balance between beauty and function. This is one of the things that's so tricky, right? Because the fireplace is here, this room was separated into two and it was pretty non-negotiable. So what we opted to do is really make the most of this tiny space by making it high function. And so we brought in this gigantic piece of furniture that has all of these drawers and all of these cabinets, and then just built the rest of it out in order to maximize the amount of storage we could get in here. I'm gonna take you upstairs and show you the bedrooms now. This is a cute piece with a cute story. John and I were in Portugal when we were, I don't know, like 20. We were so young, we were kids. And this play was being performed in Porto, and I loved the poster so much. And I wrote to the guy, and I was like, I really love the poster. Is there any way to buy one of the posters? And like 2 weeks later, a package arrived in the mail, and he had sent me one of the actual like street posters. And if you look at it, you can still see like the folds in it, because he had taken one of the big street signs and literally folded it up and put it in the mail for me, which I thought was like unbelievably adorable because he did not know me from Adam. And then a friend of mine, for a wedding present, made us this big frame for it. And here it hangs. Now we're on the second floor, and this is where two of the bedrooms are and the bathroom. This is our bathroom. It is adorable. This is called a coffin tub. I don't know if you've ever heard of one of these, but it basically is wood clad. It's got a copper lining. It's really deep. It is literally the best shower I've ever had, which is funny. The shower head is from Amazon, so sorry Waterworks, but this is amazing. And everything about it is just an absolute joy. There's something about standing on the copper. It's like very soft underfoot, and it holds the temperature of the water in a really nice way. It's just an absolute pleasure. The floor tile is from Floor & Decor. It's like cheap and cheerful. This chair I literally found on the street. It was at the end of someone's driveway, and then I had it recovered in Rogers & Goffin fabric. This is actually the shower curtain my mom made for me. It's a textile from, it was a bed sheet from Piglet in Bed, and I just had my mom is like a much better seamstress than I am, and she made me the shower curtain. The wall tiles from Urban Archaeology, and they actually have, although maybe this is like a trade secret, they have like a surplus warehouse, and you can write to them and they'll send you like a totally unintelligible list of everything they have in stock. And I just went like through it line by line until I found a tile that I liked that they had enough of, and then I literally drove to Queens and picked it up. The sink is an antique. It actually also, I'm like, I sound like a pack rat. It also came out of a client's house when we were gutting her bathroom. She wanted a vanity, and I was like, well, I don't, and I stuck it in my car. So here it is, but this is an antique, came out of the Upper West Side. And then the door is actually original to the house. and was totally painted over, so you couldn't see the pattern at all. And originally it was actually hanging upstairs in my son's bathroom, and I stole it and brought it down here and turned it into a pocket door. So my son sleeps upstairs, so for the most part, John and I are just down here alone. But I'm not going to tell you this is like a normal setup. I'm pretty sure this wouldn't work for everybody. But so what we did is we set up these doors. These are actually, they're antique. I think I found them on Facebook Marketplace. And the reason I did this is I didn't want to kill all of the natural light in this hallway. And so the idea of having these be solid just felt like it was just going to make this hallway feel so dark and so bleak. So for the most part, these are just open, but we do also have curtains. So like when we have friends over and they sleep over in the guest room, we can actually close the curtains. But this isn't the only way into this room. There's also a door over there because at some point, I guess you entered from that side. I don't know. I mean, the opening was here when we got here. There were like weird louvered doors. So this room, our primary bedroom, so we changed the louvered doors. There was like a closet that was built in here that we removed. We stripped this fireplace as well. There was magenta pink wall-to-wall carpet in here, which is a choice. It was really a shocking color of pink. And as a testimony to its quality, it had really retained its color. It was bright pink. Again, every single thing in this room has a story. So the painting above the bed, I got at a flea market in Paris. So everybody goes to like the very fancy flea market in Paris that's in the north of Paris. I do not go there because it's the very fancy flea market in Paris. There's another market that's in the south. It's the Porte de Vanves, and it's like this like real street, like a real street fair of a flea market, and it's like a quarter of the price of everything else, but there are really great finds to be had, but you just have to be willing to sort of like fight for it a little more. So I bought this there and was truly just a rolled up canvas, and I carried it with me home and then got it framed. But if you look at it, you can sort of see that it's just a canvas like mounted onto board because it was so deteriorated they couldn't wrap it. Everything else in here has a story. I bought the chair at Brimfield. Look at this is the tiniest chair. It was the first thing I saw when I drove up, and I was like, what is that itty bitty chair? Obviously, I need to bring that home. The sconces are from Serena and Lily. This is one of the things, this room is tricky. I mean, if you think about it, there are 1, 2, 3 doors in this room and windows on the other wall. There's like, and a fireplace. It's like there's almost nowhere to put a bed. So we put the bed here, and then I knew I wanted to have sconces, so we still had reading lamps. Then I was like, obviously I need to get a pair of ceramic elephants as nightstands. It's the only obvious choice. And I happened to find a pair at an antique store. There's a great antique store called the Berkshire Gallery. It's in Great Barrington, upstate. And I walked upon these and I was like, well, that's it. These are definitely what I'm looking for. The bed is literally a bed from, I think from Wayfair, maybe it was from Amazon, and I had it reupholstered. So I basically just used the frame and then had it reupholstered, and the fabric is a cravat fabric. The bed linen is from Piglet in Bed. I work with them a lot, and I love their products. I love the texture of everything, and I love all the gingham. I really kind of feel like you can't have enough gingham in your life. I just feel like it's like so cheerful and so joyful. So you'll see that a lot in our house. I really layer in a lot of gingham. The rug is an antique, I think like kind of Art Deco Chinese rug. It's silk. Facebook Marketplace, obviously. The light fixture is a dupe. It's very similar to I think they're like Pele ball chandeliers, but this is a dupe from Vault. Which I absolutely love, and I'm really sorry I bought a dupe, but I did it. And the drapes, these are like funny like design hacks. The drapes are from H&M. Who knew? But like the drapes are from H&M, and they're like charming. They have this little like ochre trim. They've got this sweet little like sort of ruching at the top, and they feel like really intentional and really chosen, and they were really inexpensive. So it's interesting, there are like different websites you can look where you'd never really expect that you could get home goods, but like H&M, Zara, like these places you'd never really expect to look for home goods, and they can be a great hack to buy things that are a little less expensive and still add like a nice layer to your house. When I walked into our townhouse, I mean, it was absolutely brimming with someone else's stuff. The former occupants had lived here for 80 years, and they were like 3 generations all living in the house. But everything was really intact still. Like all of the fireplaces were here, all of the moldings were here, the crown moldings, the huge baseboards, all of these really beautiful details that are really hard to synthesize were here. And in some respects, like all of the other stuff that needed to be like tweaked and repaired and put back together, that's work I can do. But like creating, incredible carved, ornate crown moldings, that is just absolutely beyond my skill set. And so finding something where those details were intact felt like such a gem. By the time you find a house in New York City, it's already been like gutted by someone who had like a really enthusiastic love affair with Home Depot tile. And like, I didn't want that. I didn't want to buy something that somebody had already like whitewashed or like gray washed and turned into something modern. That's not what I was looking for. I wanted something I could really put my own stamp on. And this was just totally untouched. So we built this entire wall of cabinets, and it's basically, I wanted it to look like it was paneling, but it's actually storage. So at the end, we have the laundry cabinet, and we have like a built-in laundry. You want to get in there? Now you really are looking at my dirty laundry. And then the next one over is a linen cupboard. And then the next one over is like all coats and suitcases. And then what we did, so these are literally just doors from IKEA. And we had we bought 7 doors from IKEA. And then we worked with this incredibly talented carpenter who mimicked the same style up above and then mounted them all on sort of hidden hinges so that when they were all closed, they looked like they were essentially like a continuous wall of paneling. But again, these are like these funny hacks, right? Like this is just IKEA, and then we just made it look a lot more intentional, and then we painted it so it feels like it's specific to this space. These are both vintage pieces. I picked them up in Mexico City when I was in Mexico City. This is a totally crazy piece of art that came from like an outsider art festival in San Francisco. It's literally painted on a roller shade. And then this is our guest room, which is cute. If you live in New York City and you have a guest room, you're basically running a hotel. So it's like good to have like a nice, functional, welcoming guest room. They've got their own bathroom. Like I swear, like once a week we've got somebody sleeping in here. It's like, it's a blessing and a curse, but it's a pretty neat thing to be able to have friends and family be able to pop in. And then let's go upstairs. Now we're upstairs. This is my son's little powder room. And we added this sink. I think I like found this sink. I like found it at a yard sale for $10 or something, like honestly like 15 years ago. And I just have been like carrying it from house to house being like, one day, green sink. And we got here and this bathroom only had a toilet and no sink. So we had the plumbing run and put in and it was like, well, that's exactly what is meant to be here because there's 1 inch on either side of this wall. And then I painted the walls to match the sink. And then all the wallpaper is actually a collection of French costume drawings that came out of, this is a ridiculous story. I was on the Upper East Side and I was driving along and there was a junk luggers van and I saw these guys like throwing these boxes of like beautiful prints into this junk luggers van. So I like screeched to a halt and I jumped out and I was like, wait, what are you doing? And the guys looked at me like I was totally nuts. And I was like, wait, I'll take them. And I begged them to pull the prints out of the back of the truck. and they gave me like boxes of these prints. And if you look at them really closely, they're like hand painted. They're absolutely gorgeous. So I came home and I was like, well, now what? Like, what's the game plan? Now I've got these like hundreds of these prints. And I decided that I was going to basically sort of install them like wallpaper. So I just Mod Podged them up, and it's just page after page, and I just sort of set them up as a grid. And now they're wallpaper. And also I still have like hundreds of them. So if anybody needs any, I've got a bunch. And then this little guy is just a little magnet. Look at, he's like a little solar light. Isn't he cute? And then you can like pop him off and charge him. What a charmer. This is my son's room. You should know it's never this clean. It's literally only because you guys are here. Usually it's like basically carpeted in Lego. But this room, you know, I mean, I think a lot of designers struggle with this with their kids, because I want it to be his room and I want it to be emblematic of him, and I want him to feel like ownership of it and feel comfortable in it. But I also don't want it to be like covered. Like if he had his way, he would have like a otters in space blanket or something. Like it would be not what I'm doing. And so I think we tried to like kind of find a balance between like Godzilla and Bob's Burgers and gingham and lovely patterns and colors. And so he chose the paint color. He was like, I want gold trim. He agreed to the blue ceiling. He was into that. That wasn't of his, that was my idea, but he was into it. We've got all of these poster frames. So these also came from H&M, and they're absolutely genius. They're magnetic. And that way, like he swapped them out as he's like gotten older. He's like changed them for different things. But again, it's like one of these things, like if he had his druthers, they would just be like on the wall with like push pins. But just by having them in these little magnet frames, it makes them feel like a little more intentional, a little more chosen, a little less teenage boy. So that's the scoop. Again, this fireplace, we also stripped back. It was covered in like 10,000 coats of paint. This room was the room that was honestly the most intact in the house. Like all of the ceiling, the molding, everything was really in really good shape. So it was really just about like painting and kind of just bringing it back to life, which is pretty great. And then the other thing that's really cool about his room is he's got this little space that he calls his studio. And it's like just another little nook. And he has a green screen that he sometimes sets up, and he does like little stop motion animation. And he has a desk in here, and it's like his own little kind of reading room. And then I put up this wallpaper. This came from, I think it might be from Sonneman. And you know, it's just like fun and playful, and he was really into it. And it picks up a lot of like the kind of the greens and blues from the rest of the house. So it just felt like kind of a great splash. Like I can't imagine putting it in a big room, but it's really perfect in this little space. The curtains come from IKEA. But again, they're like dynamite. They're blackout. They're like, the color is great. The pattern is great. It works really well in the room. So that's the scoop. Like one of the incredible things about having a townhouse is having outdoor space. Like in New York City, that is one of the most coveted commodities, is having outdoor space. So come see ours. It's not big, but it's mighty. So when we got here, it was really a jungle. It's a little bit of a jungle right now because we're like in the height of the summer, but it was like a jungle, like completely overgrown. And we installed the stone patio, and I've just got things like growing as they go, but it's pretty enchanted. I really wanted it to feel like sort of a secret garden. I wanted to have some privacy, but all of this stuff is stuff that we planted in the last 2 years, and it's just like growing gangbusters, which is pretty crazy. We planted this cherry tree, we've got string lights. Our neighbors have grapes growing over the wires, so they grow up all over the summer. It's a pretty enchanted space. And to be able to like sit out here and barbecue and hang out with friends at night feels like just magical. It's funny, I joke about this with the whole house. It sort of feels like it's a country house in the city. And this, I think even more so. It really feels like you're in your own magic garden, even though, you know, you're surrounded by 8 million other people. So I think what makes a house a home is, in my opinion anyway, I think it needs to be sort of demonstrative of who lives there. And I think our house is like really a collection of our stories. I mean, as I said, every single piece has a story. Every single piece came from a different place. So much of it's come from our travels as a family or as a couple. And it's really like this sort of lovely accumulation of our lives all in a nutshell, right? It's like, this is all the things we've done up until this point. And I think there's something about that, like you walk into our house and you get a real clear understanding of who we are as people and who we are as a family. And that's the difference between a house and a home.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to go to homeworthy.com for exclusive content, shopping guides, and so much more.